This is my ranking of roguelike games like Hades that I've played, based purely on my personal experience. Each game is placed from masterpiece down to trash, depending on how satisfying the combat feels, how varied the runs are, and how much they keep me coming back after each attempt. Let's get straight into the list. Lethal Honor Order of the Apocalypse presents a dark world where every fight feels heavy and deliberate, and I have to stay focused on timing rather than rushing attacks. I like how the melee combat feels grounded, with clear enemy patterns that reward patience and careful movement. The comic-style panels between encounters add bits of story in a simple way and keep me curious about what's happening on Wolf Island. The tone stays serious and consistent, but later characters don't feel very distinct and start blending together. Progression adds small upgrades, though builds rarely feel different, so repeated runs can lose variety over time. Some boss fights have sudden difficulty spikes that feel more punishing than fair. The visual style carries much of the experience and keeps it memorable. This one settles into the good tier. Wizard of Legend focuses on fast combat, where I rely on quick reactions and precise dodging to survive each encounter. I like how every run pushes me to learn enemy patterns and use my spells more carefully instead of relying on simple attacks. The spell system offers a lot of variety, letting me mix different abilities and create builds that feel unique each time. Combat stays intense, especially during boss fights where timing and patience matter the most. The difficulty is great, but it feels fair because mistakes are usually my own. I also enjoy how relics and upgrades give small boosts that can change how I approach fights. There's always something new to try, which keeps runs interesting. It stays challenging without feeling repetitive over time. This one secures its place in the excellent tier. Moonlighter 2, The Endless Vault keeps the same loop of exploring dungeons at night and running a shop during the day, and that idea still works really well. I like how collecting relics and then setting prices creates a nice balance between action and management. Combat feels more expanded this time with different weapons, dodging, and even ranged options, though it can feel a bit clunky in tight spaces. Some areas don't match their visual boundaries, which leads to awkward movement, and I also notice small glitches like enemies freezing or NPCs disappearing. There is a lot to do with upgrades, side quests, and shop improvements, which keeps things moving. The shift to 3D visuals looks fine but loses some charm from the earlier style. It stays fun despite a few rough edges. This one finds its place in the great tier. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Splintered Fate follows a familiar roguelike structure where I fight through rooms, collect upgrades, and return stronger after each run. Each turtle feels different to play, with unique abilities that change how I approach combat, and I like switching between them to keep things fresh. The gameplay clearly takes heavy inspiration from Hades, but it still works well and feels smooth most of the time. Boss fights can get tough, especially with different variations that force me to adapt quickly. There are multiple currencies and upgrades, which add depth but can feel a bit messy to manage. Multiplayer is a strong addition and makes runs more chaotic and fun. Some crashes and limited enemy variety hold it back slightly. This one earns its spot in the great tier. Realm of Ink follows a familiar roguelike style where I move through rooms, defeat enemies, and build my character with different abilities during each run. Combat feels fast and responsive, with light and heavy attacks that I can mix depending on the situation. The Ink system adds some variety, giving both passive bonuses and active skills that can shape how I play. I like how different builds can come together, though not every run feels unique enough to stay exciting for long. There are plenty of upgrades, perks, and forms to unlock, which keep progression moving forward. The game already feels quite complete for early access, but some repetition shows up in enemy encounters and boss fights. It stays engaging, though it doesn't reach the same depth as stronger roguelikes. This one settles into the good tier. Curse of the Dead Gods focuses on careful combat where every action uses stamina, so I have to think before attacking or dodging. I like how fights reward timing and positioning instead of rushing in. The curse system adds an interesting risk layer, as taking shortcuts with blood offerings builds corruption and changes how the run plays. Some curses help while also creating new problems, which keeps things unpredictable. The temple structure breaks progression into smaller sections, making it easier to learn and improve over time. Weapons feel good to use, though many upgrades don't change playstyles in big ways. There isn't much focus on story, but that doesn't take away from the gameplay. Each run stays tense and engaging, with strong enemy variety and smart design choices. This one rises into the excellent tier. Unexplored 2, The Wayfarer's Legacy takes a different approach, where I travel across a large world map instead of going through simple room-based runs. I like how each journey feels more like an adventure, with choices, events, and survival elements shaping what happens next. The systems around camping, resources, and planning add depth and make me think before moving forward. However, combat feels very basic and not very rewarding, which makes many encounters feel unnecessary. The token-based system for challenges is interesting at first, but it becomes repetitive over time. I also ran into technical issues like long loading screens and occasional glitches, which break the flow. Despite that, the art style and music keep the world engaging to explore. It has strong ideas, even if execution isn't always smooth. This one finds its place in the great tier. Dead Cells keeps me constantly moving through fast-paced levels where combat and platforming flow together in a really smooth way. Every run feels fresh because layouts, enemies, and weapons keep changing, which makes me adapt on the fly. I like how different builds can completely change my approach, whether I focus on speed, ranged attacks, or heavy damage setups. The movement feels sharp and responsive, rewarding quick reactions and precise timing. Progression also feels satisfying, with permanent unlocks slowly making future runs stronger without removing the challenge. Even after many attempts, I keep discovering new paths, gear, and strategies that keep things interesting. The difficulty is tough but fair, pushing me to improve instead of holding me back. Everything comes together in a way that stays engaging for a long time. This one easily stands in the masterpiece tier. Redacted follows a familiar roguelike loop where I fight through rooms, gain upgrades, and try to push further with each run. The combat feels fast and responsive, with satisfying weapons and abilities that make every encounter chaotic and intense. I like the comic-style visuals and how everything looks bold and easy to read during fights. There are also rival characters that interact during runs, adding a bit of personality and variety. However, the difficulty can feel a bit too harsh, as enemies scale quickly and progress starts to feel slow instead of rewarding. Even though I keep getting stronger, it doesn't always feel like I'm improving in a meaningful way. That takes away some of the motivation to keep going. It has good ideas and a strong presentation, but the balance holds it back. This one ends up sitting in the mediocre tier. Children of Morta blends roguelike combat with a strong focus on family, where I play as different members of the Bergsons, each with their own abilities and playstyles. I like how switching characters changes the rhythm of combat, making each run feel different depending on who I choose. The combat itself is simple but satisfying, especially as I unlock new skills and upgrades over time. What stands out the most is how story moments appear between runs, showing the family's struggles and growth. That connection makes progress feel more meaningful. The game does require some grinding, but it usually feels like I'm improving rather than just repeating the same tasks. The visuals and animations also add a lot of charm to the experience. It stays engaging both mechanically and emotionally. This one earns its place in the excellent tier. Sworn follows a familiar roguelike structure where I clear rooms, pick upgrades, and slowly build a stronger character across each run. Combat feels solid, with well-timed dodges and attacks that reward careful play instead of rushing in. I like the variety of weapons and abilities, which give different ways to approach fights and experiment with builds. The art style also stands out with a comic-inspired look that gives the world a strong identity. Boss fights are well-designed and push me to learn patterns, which keeps things engaging. However, much of the game feels too similar to other roguelikes, especially in how upgrades and progression work. It doesn't do enough to stand apart, and that lack of originality holds it back. Even with good mechanics, it feels familiar more than fresh. This one ends up in the mediocre tier. Risk of Rain 2 builds each run around constant escalation, where I start slow but everything quickly becomes faster, louder, and more chaotic. I like how the difficulty keeps rising over time instead of staying fixed, which pushes me to keep moving and make decisions quickly. The variety of items is a huge highlight, as stacking them can completely change how my character plays and lead to some crazy combinations. Each character also feels different, giving me new ways to approach runs and experiment with playstyles. Playing solo is fun, but runs become much more dynamic in co-op with different roles working together. The game keeps building intensity until it feels overwhelming in a good way. Every run feels unique and unpredictable. This one easily belongs in the masterpiece tier. Undermine uses a classic dungeon crawling loop where I explore floors, collect gold, and slowly grow stronger across multiple runs. I like how gold plays a bigger role here, since I can bring some of it back and use it for permanent upgrades, which gives a steady sense of progression. The gameplay is simple but satisfying, with solid combat and a clear structure that's easy to understand. One thing that stands out is how collecting gold becomes risky, with small enemies trying to steal it, adding tension to every room. The variety in enemies, shops, and upgrades keeps runs interesting, even if it doesn't feel as deep as some other roguelikes. It stays consistent and engaging without doing anything too bold or unique. This one lands in the great tier. Dandy Ace revolves around fast-paced combat where I use magical cards to attack, dodge, and create different combinations during each run. I like how the card system lets me mix abilities together, turning simple attacks into more creative and powerful versions. It gives me freedom to experiment and adjust my playstyle depending on what I find. Combat feels smooth most of the time, with clear enemy patterns that reward quick reactions. The visual style also stands out, with bright colors and a playful tone that makes everything feel lively. However, the story doesn't do much to keep me invested, and some rooms feel overwhelming with too many enemies at once. That can make certain moments feel unfair instead of challenging. It stays fun mechanically even with those issues. This one finds its place in the good tier. Beat Slayer mixes roguelike combat with rhythm elements, where I fight through enemies while trying to stay in sync with the music. I like the idea of timing attacks to the beat, but in practice, it doesn't feel necessary since I can just mash buttons and still perform well. Combat has some variety with different enemies and hazards, though it can feel stiff and lacks clear feedback when I take damage. There are upgrades and abilities to unlock between runs, but they don't change gameplay in a big way, so progression feels limited. The setting is interesting on paper, but the story and characters don't hold my attention for long. Repeated voice lines also start to get annoying over time. It has a few good ideas, but they don't come together well. This one falls into the mediocre tier. Hellclock leans into action RPG combat with roguelike progression, where I focus on upgrading abilities and stacking effects to become stronger in each run. I like how quickly power increases, with upgrades that noticeably boost damage and change how I approach fights. Combat can feel satisfying at times, especially when abilities start chaining together and clearing enemies quickly. However, much of the progress comes from menus and stat upgrades rather than skill, which makes some encounters feel unbalanced. There are moments when I feel strong but still struggle against enemies that take too long to defeat. The structure stays engaging early on, but loses momentum as I continue playing. It has some fun ideas, but they don't stay consistent throughout. This one ends up in the mediocre tier. Unexplored offers a different kind of roguelike experience where I explore dungeons that feel more natural and less like simple connected rooms. I like how each level has its own structure, with varied layouts, puzzles, and hidden paths that make exploration more interesting. Combat is slower and more focused on positioning, which makes me think before engaging instead of rushing in. There's no traditional leveling system, so progress depends on the items and tools I find, which adds a layer of unpredictability. Some interface elements can feel a bit clunky at first, and enemy variety could be better over time. Still, the unique design choices help it stand out enough. This one settles into the good tier. Dreamscaper combines roguelike combat with a personal story where I fight through dream worlds while learning more about the main character's struggles. I like how there's a balance between action and quieter moments, where talking to people and building relationships helps improve my runs. Combat feels smooth, with a good mix of weapons and abilities that let me adjust how I play each time. The dream environments also look distinct and keep things visually interesting. Progression feels rewarding since I'm unlocking both gameplay upgrades and story elements at the same time. However, the difficulty can feel uneven, with some fights being much harder than expected. Despite that, the overall experience stays engaging and meaningful. It has a nice mix of mechanics and narrative that keeps me coming back. This one earns its place in the great tier. Ravenswatch brings fast-paced combat into an open map where I explore freely instead of moving room by room, which makes each run feel more dynamic. I like how the ticking day and night cycle adds pressure, forcing me to decide where to go and what to prioritize before time runs out. The different characters stand out a lot, each with unique abilities that completely change how I approach fights. Combat feels smooth and responsive, especially when dealing with groups of enemies or tougher encounters. The world design and art style also give it a strong identity that stays memorable. However, playing solo can feel a bit unbalanced, with difficulty spikes that are harder to manage alone. It works much better in co-op, where teamwork adds more depth. This one secures its place in the great tier. Shape of Dreams offers a roguelike setup with multiple characters, abilities, and upgrades that give a lot of options during each run. I like how there are many different combinations of skills and modifiers, which can lead to strong builds when everything lines up. The progression system also has depth, with unlocks and upgrades that carry across runs. However, despite all that variety on paper, the actual gameplay doesn't feel as engaging as it should. Enemy variety is limited early on, which makes runs feel repetitive faster than expected. The lack of a strong story or memorable moments also makes it harder to stay invested over time. Even though there are good ideas here, they don't come together in a satisfying way. It feels like it has potential but doesn't fully deliver. This one ends up in the trash tier. Moonlighter combines dungeon crawling at night with running a shop during the day, and I like how these two parts connect with each other. I collect loot during runs and then decide how to price and sell it, which adds a nice layer of strategy outside of combat. The combat itself feels smooth, with different weapon types that let me switch between playstyles depending on the situation. Managing inventory also becomes important because of item curses, which makes every run more thoughtful. The shop system is surprisingly engaging as I adjust prices based on customer reactions and try to maximize profit. It does take some time before everything opens up and becomes more interesting, but once it does, it becomes hard to stop playing. The balance between action and management works really well. This one finds its place in the great tier. Lost in Random: The Eternal Die delivers a familiar roguelike structure where I move through rooms, fight enemies, and grow stronger with each run. I like how combat feels fast and responsive, with different weapons and abilities that let me approach fights in my own way. The card system adds some variety, though I notice the same abilities appearing often, which makes runs feel a bit repetitive over time. The world and characters have personality, but the story is harder to follow without knowing the previous game, which makes it less engaging. Progression between runs feels solid, with upgrades that help me push further each time. It stays fun to play, but it doesn't reach the depth or variety of stronger roguelikes. This one settles into the good tier. Netherworld Covenant focuses on simple but precise combat where I rely on timing, dodging, and positioning to survive each encounter. I like how the core mechanics feel smooth, especially when using parries and movement to handle groups of enemies. The addition of soul companions and different weapons gives some flexibility in how I approach fights, which keeps things a bit varied. The world has a dark tone, and the setup is easy to understand, giving enough reason to keep progressing. However, outside of combat, it doesn't do much to stand out from other roguelikes. Progression and structure feel very familiar, and there isn't enough variety to keep things interesting over longer sessions. It has a solid base, but it doesn't go far beyond that. This one ends up in the mediocre tier. That's my ranking of roguelikes, based on what kept each run exciting and worth repeating. Some stayed fresh no matter how many attempts I made, while others lost their pull once the runs started feeling the same. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.
We need to form a circle.